I Travel Across America and Deal with Some Problems, Part 3, by Logan Burns, 346. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. First things first, I'm sorry for taking so long to get this new part of this little journal out. I found myself to be in a deep, dark, and long job that took a lot longer than expected, and I was finally able to wrap it up a couple of nights ago. I actually took my first set of R&R days afterwards. And now that my break is over, I can finally give y'all a new installment, since you guys seem to enjoy these pretty well. Now, I might keep this one relatively short, but if y'all couldn't tell already, I do tend to get carried away with the details at times, so I don't know if I'll end up sticking with that. So without further ado, let's get into it. Just like every other previous piece of this puzzle, I'm going to get started with a bit more information about me and what I do, and any other lore that matters to the grand scheme of everything I'm trying to do here. Since today's story is about some of the faces that I've met that also do this sort of thing, I guess I should tell you about that in general. Now, I'm part of a rare breed, as far as I can tell, and we are by no means an organization by any stretch of the imagination. We all do our own thing in the areas that we're comfortable with, and sometimes people overlap with one another. That's how I found out that this was a lot bigger than I initially expected, and that I was by no means the pioneer that I thought myself to be. From the Dakotas to Texas, the Carolinas to Washington, there are at least a dozen or so individuals or groups of problem solvers or hunters or whatever you want to call us. I don't really call myself anything. Some of them are nicer folks, people that I can really get along with, and some of them, the DeVroe brothers being the best example, are not too terribly great. Be it because they're assholes themselves or because they don't agree with how another person does things, there is bound to be conflict in such a loose group of people. I've actually had to fight some of them more commonly than you'd really expect. We're on the same side after all, right? A younger, more optimistic, well, maybe optimistic is a stretch of the imagination for any iteration of myself, but a younger version of myself might have said, yeah, of course we're on the same side. The reality of the situation is as bleak as anything else on God's green earth. And the reality is that people do this for all kinds of reasons, and some of them are just as weird as the things that we hunt. I mean, I've heard everything from it being our divine right, and that it was a crusade against the devils of the earth, all the way down to some eugenetic Holocaust type thing. That guy did focus on gang violence though, surprise, surprise. At times I reminisce on how I used to think 20 years back, how when I first started this that I'd only be dealing with monsters. I wonder if there was any way that I could have realized then that people are the worst monsters of them all. I think that's enough information for today, so let's lay out the story for y'all. This is the first time that I ran into one of my fellow problem solvers. Worst first impression definitely goes to these guys. They were lunatics. It was the mid-90s and some twist of fate landed me in the heartlands of Alabama. A redneck mecca, to be perfectly honest. Now, by the time these guys got involved, I was already done wrapping up most of the case. In fact, I had already put a 12-gauge slug into the skull and liver of the brush banshee that I had found lurking out in the areas surrounding the little podunk town. And I was getting everything together to get out of there and back to a nicer part of the country. Now, I grew up down south, graduated from the University of North Carolina a couple of months before I started this conquest across the continent. And I found out that there is a lot more in the rest of the country compared to the areas that I was from in the deep south. No respect to my hometown though. It's one of the better ones. I was just loading up my Ithaca 37 in the trunk of my Chrysler when slivers of headlights cut through the bushes and trees and gave my eyes a proverbial wake-up call. I blinked a few times to adjust my sight to the new brightness, and before I knew it, 3 dudes crawled out of this big Dodge truck and started a mean staring contest with me unknowingly. Now, these guys were definitely younger than me. With me being 30 at the time, it's more likely than you'd think, but they did not look the part of some of the kids that I'd seen in the woods or campers like that. Even with the light silhouetting them, I knew that they were out here for something a bit more important. "Hey stranger, what you doing with that pump gun you just stored?" the front man asked. I recall him resting his hands on his hips afterwards. "I just heard a noise is all. I'm packing it up to get out of here. I'd suggest you don't go poking through these woods tonight. "There's dangerous game out there," I responded. I wasn't sure what they were up to, so I just went with that generic response. "What kind of dangerous game?" the guy to the left asked. His voice had a bit more twang in it than the first. "Wild dogs, I think. That's what it looked like, at least." "You sure it ain't one of them creatures?" said the other. "What creatures?" I said. "You heard me. You poking around for creatures," said another. Now at this point, I had picked up two things. The first was the fact that these kids knew exactly what was out here. And the second was that they didn't seem very happy about the fact that I might know what was out here. Like they were really, really not happy about it. I came to that conclusion when one of them brandished a revolver out of nowhere. Now, as you would expect, I was more on edge when this kid pulled his piece on me, but I tried to play it cool. "Hey, why'd you get the pistol out?" I said. "Just answer our question, feller." "You answer mine first," I said. Now at this point, I picked up on the fact that the previously mentioned kid who had brandished his piece at me was now starting to slowly but surely raise the thing in my direction. Now, please don't ask me why these kids decided I was to be shot. I don't quite know, and I don't think I want to know. But I jumped back into action though. I snatched the Ithaca right back out of my open trunk, and I slam-fired it at them until it was empty. Of course, I took cover behind my car as I did so, but they plugged my trunk with a few rounds and put a nice hole in my back windshield. I took the kid who already had his pistol out first, burying the slugs I still had loaded right into his abdomen. The other rounds were flyers and did nothing but make the other two clamber back around their truck to get some semblance of cover. I discarded my shotgun and pulled my Model 59 out of my waistband and prepared for a fight. They returned fire soon afterwards, and rounds started whizzing through the metal of my car as if it weren't there. I quickly moved to the front of the car and the engine block as not to get plugged by one of the stray rounds. I returned fire to great effect, going prone under my car and firing at their feet and legs until they crumpled further into view. I had a plan here, and it involved not damaging the truck. Within seconds, I had used a full magazine and killed both of them almost definitely. The kid who took the gut shot was still writhing on the ground, so I slipped in a new magazine and put one in his skull before stripping my absolutely demolished car. Yeah, I abandoned my tried and true Chrysler and instead nabbed their Dodge truck. Got everything in the truck, including their guns, and got out of there before the cops were called. Now, getting this car cleaned up and put in my name was not an easy task, so I put it on the market several states away and used the money to buy a new car in my own name. To be fair, I don't quite know if these guys were even hunters. They may have worshipped the brush banshee for all I know. It's not the craziest thing that I've seen in my time doing this. Now I know this one was pretty short and simple, but I was trying to give y'all an idea of how xenophobic some of these guys are so that you don't have questions when I get into some of the more prominent ones, especially with the DeVros. As per usual, leave any comment, concern, or question down below. If you have any subject that you'd like me to write about, just ask for it and I'll try my best. Y'all all have a good night.